a most glorious meeting.
When we were casting the film, Walt immediately said, I know the perfect person to play the mother, and that is Glynis Johns. She's just absolutely right. And we all agreed, she's absolutely perfect.
Gracious, Kate and Anna, you're not leaving. What will Mr. Banks say? He's going to be cross enough as it is to come home and find the children missing.
So we had the casting people call her to come in and have lunch with the group of us who were doing the film. And Glynis was told, Walt wants to talk to you about Mary Poppins. And so I'm sure she just was convinced that she was going to be the character of Mary Poppins. In the course of conversation, it came up that, well, we've already signed Julie Andrews. She's going to play the lead.
I said to Walt, it might give me an incentive if I could have my own little number.
Walt reached over and said, but Glynis, the boys are just finishing a great number for you. You're going to love it. Wait till you hear it. So he says, all right. I'll have to hear it. And if I like it, then I might consider doing the part. So she left. Walt said, get on this thing. You got to write something for her. Well, we had this song that we had written called Practically Perfect. So we said, that could be a suffragette song.
By the time I got back to the Chateau Marmont, the telephone was ringing, and it was Walt. He said, listen to this. I heard the first few bars of Sister Suffragette.
We're clearly soldiers in petticoats.
Glynis was interested then.
When I think now of how nearly I didn't do it, it's amazing because I'm so proud to be part of it.
It's grand to be an Englishman in 1910.
Bill Walsh had seen David Tomlinson in several English films, and we sent for them. And Walt and Bob and I and Stevenson and DeGrady, we all sat down and watched these films. And Walt said, very good, let's see if we can get him. And that's how it was. It was simple as that. We just knew he had the right personality.
Thank you, most interesting. Now I think we've had quite enough of this nonsense.
Ed Wynn was, again, Walt Disney's inspiration. Walt always wanted to have Ed Wynn in something. He was, in Absent-Minded Professor, he was the fire chief. He'd come in and do things. And he was in Babes in Toyland. He was the toy maker. He just loved Ed Wynn, and everybody did.
I'm having such a good time. I wish that you could all stay up here all the time.
Working with Ed, who had that wonderful way of laughing, and that lisp of him always made me laugh.
We love to laugh, so everybody can hear.
The kids, at some point, after so many takes, would have a very difficult time getting the laughs up and keep that energy up. But Julie and Ed and I thoroughly enjoyed ourselves.
The flying sequences were fantastic. Every day we went to work, we seemed to be up in the air, even if it was only a couple of feet off the ground. It was terrific.
Matthew Garber, who played Michael, was afraid of heights and did not like being hung around on wires all day. But somebody offered him a dime every time he went up on the wires, and he made an absolute fortune.
He got extra money for that. Every time he did a take, he got paid another dime. It was quite a going concern. I was bigger on lemonade stands on the weekend myself.
It was, hard work. It was a lot of fun, but there was a lot of standing and waiting for the lighting, and and Matthew would get fidgety and bite me on the leg once in a while.
I love that.
Matthew, stop it. He just didn't know what to do with himself. There was one time when they needed him to laugh. They wanted him to laugh on camera.
That's right.
And he wouldn't laugh. They said, Dick, go behind the camera and make him laugh. And he was determined he was not going to laugh.
Really?
And I made every face and fell down. I did everything I could think of, and he would not laugh.
Oh, my God.
He just decided not to.
He knew his power, that kid.
Walt himself came up with the technical approach to achieve the fact that once they were all laughing, they're all floating about in the air. So every shot had to be treated in a different way, so that if for one split second you thought, oh, they must have been on wires there, then the next shot would be done in such a way that they were actually sitting on the end of a teeter-totter in relative close-up, so you could see very clearly that there were in fact no wires. Walt did these little drawings that showed our set, first of all in its standard setting, just realistically, and then on its side, with the roof on its side, and then with the ceiling upside down, and then within a small truncated portion of ceiling at ground level. And that was entirely to achieve this floating quality so that the audience wouldn't catch on how it was being done.
The techniques used in Mary Poppins are techniques that are really common and familiar to filmmakers today in the first part of this millennium. Things like puppeteering and animatronics. And if you look at a modern movie, they are full of those things. And here, Walt Disney and his studio were doing those things 40 years ago. It was astonishing, I think, to probably watch this movie and see the way the characters defied gravity, the way that, Dick Van Dyke pulled up his pants and slid across the floor like an animated character as though there were no physical forces acting on him at all.
There were a lot of special effects in Poppins, and I think that it was a great lesson in discipline for me, because who knew how to make a film? I certainly didn't. And Robert Stevenson, our director, was so kind and patient with me, because I had no idea what long shots and medium shots and close-ups and things like that meant.
Of all the wonderful things that Walt was coming up with for this movie, one of the greatest moments in my songwriting career was we had finished this song, Jolly Holiday, and we were playing it for the first time for Walt, and Don DeGrady had developed a bunch of beautiful sketches for this thing. And there's a section in the song where 4 waiters were going to come out, and Walt said, "Hold it."
And he said, "Waiters have always reminded me of penguins." So they made them penguins. That would have never occurred to any human being except Walt Disney. He had this wonderful, whimsical way about him.
Walt said, as a matter of fact, we'll animate everything in that sequence except for the principal characters. We can do that. We have this sodium vapor process that Ub Iwerks has created.
Animation and live action together is as old as the film industry itself. The Disney Brothers studio, when they first started out, made a Alice series, and you would go with a live action Alice into this wonderful animated kind of series of events and episodes. And so the very kind of essence and beginnings of Disney Studio were using that technique, which we later saw hit its stride in a movie like Mary Poppins.
The animation scenes were extremely difficult, but it was a challenge that I thoroughly enjoyed. I loved every minute of it, working with the animators, because one of my great loves is mime. I love to do mime. I started out kind of as a mime. So I was working with these characters who weren't there, which is a dream for a mime. And so they found me easy to work with for that reason.
We had the horses to react to and the geese, and then that little sly fox sitting next to us. But in actual fact, it was just a cardboard cutout with a crew member sort of moving it around, trying to make us excited. And I couldn't conceive of what they meant, that there was going to be animation put in afterwards. So Walt and obviously that fantastic director Robert Stevenson, he just made it so exciting to come to work and to keep especially 2 little bratty kids completely occupied.
It's just absolutely fantastic, needless to say, because you had really top animators. Frank Thomas, for example, who was responsible for the dance sequence with the penguins, and Dick Van Dyke. It is just hard to imagine for a live-action director what the animator is going to be up against later on. You can talk about it with the animator, but how you frame something and how you go about it later on in the animation is something only the animator knows.
Bob Stevenson, who's doing the live action, had been told, don't worry about the animation, you just get your part as good as you can. So when I'd get over on the stage, I'd say, where am I going to put my penguins? But as I'd get the film of Dick actually doing the dance, here's his feet flying all around, he's stepping on my penguins. How are you going to know ahead of time where he's going to be and where Dick Van Dyke's going to be? So I was losing more penguins every day. I had them duck, and I had them jump, and I had them get out of the way any way they could.
And it's so entertaining. The solutions that Frank found are just ingenious. I was one of the 4 supervising animators on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. When I look at Frank Thomas's penguins, I thought, okay, we went technically further and we added highlights and shadows onto our characters, which you don't have in Mary Poppins, but look at the performance and look at the charm, and I become very, very humble again.